It was May 31st, 1223, and along the banks of the Kalka River, a mighty army of Rus princes and Cuman horsemen surged forward, convinced they were closing in on victory. Their Mongol enemies seemed to be in retreat, vulnerable, ripe for destruction. This was the Battle of the Kalka River. To understand how this battle unfolded, we have to step back and look at the fractured world of Eastern Europe in the early 13th century. The Rus principalities, descendants of the once unified Kievan Rus, were divided and often at odds. Princes ruled their territories with little coordination, and their neighbors, the nomadic Cumans, roamed the steppes to the south. For years, these groups had lived in uneasy proximity, but in 1223, a new, far deadlier force arrived from the east, the Mongols. Under the leadership of Genghis Khan, the Mongol Empire had exploded across Asia. After destroying the Khwarezmian Empire, two of Genghis Khan's most trusted generals, Jebe and Subutai, embarked on a long punishing campaign through Central Asia, the Caucasus, and now into the western steppe. Their mission was twofold: scout new territories and crush resistance. Their forces, hardened by years of warfare, were made up almost entirely of elite cavalry, masters of mobility, discipline, and deadly archery. The first contact between the Mongols and the Cumans was catastrophic for the nomads. Driven westward by the relentless Mongol advance, the Cumans sought refuge and allies among the Rus' principalities. Khan Khotan, leader of the Cumans, warned the Rus' princes of the Mongol threat and convinced them to join forces. Though reluctant, several prominent Rus' leaders agreed to the alliance. Among them were Mstislav Mstislavich, known as the Bold, Prince of Galicia-Volhynia, Mstislav Romanovich of Kiev, and Mstislav Sviatoslavich of Chernigov. Together they mustered a coalition army, which by some estimates numbered up to 80,000 men, though medieval sources often exaggerate. Despite their numbers, the coalition's greatest weakness was clear: disunity. Each prince commanded his own forces, and there was no overall leader to coordinate strategy. The Cumans, while fierce horsemen, were undisciplined and prone to panic under pressure. The Mongols, on the other hand, operated as a single cohesive machine. In the spring of 1223, Mongol envoys approached the Rus camp. They claimed they had no quarrel with the Rus and were only pursuing the Cumans, but suspicion and pride overwhelmed caution. Mstislav of Kiev ordered the envoys executed, a fateful decision that sealed the fate of the coalition. In May, the Rus coalition crossed the Dnieper River. The vanguard, led by Mstislav of Galicia, encountered Mongol forward units and routed them. The enemy fled into the steppe. Their leader was captured and swiftly executed. Flush with confidence, the Rus army advanced deeper into unfamiliar lands. But this was no retreat. It was a carefully orchestrated ruse. Jebe and Subutai withdrew by design, baiting the overconfident coalition further into the open steppe. For 9 days, the Mongols retreated, always staying just beyond reach. Meanwhile, cracks formed among the Rus' leaders. Prince Romanovich of Kiev urged caution, sensing danger, but his warnings were dismissed. Pride and the promise of easy victory pushed the army onward. By the end of May, the coalition reached the banks of the Kalka River. Once again, the Mongols appeared to scatter in retreat. The Rus' princes argued, should they pause, regroup, or press the attack? In the end, the eager Cumans crossed first, followed by Mstislav of Galicia and the army of Chernigov. Prince Romanovich, wary and unconvinced, remained on the far side of the river with his troops. What they couldn't yet see was that the battlefield had been chosen for them. The Mongols weren't fleeing, they were waiting. The stage was set. The trap was moments from springing shut. The calm of the open steppe was shattered as the Cuman riders, backed by the armies of Ruses, surged across the Kalka River. Ahead, the Mongols scattered like leaves in the wind. Victory seemed inevitable. Their enemy, outnumbered and retreating, was surely broken. But appearances on the steppe are deceiving. Hidden beyond the ridgelines, behind the hills and in the long grass, Subutai and Jebe's army watched and waited. Their moment had arrived. The allied army pressed forward in 4 distinct formations. The Cumans acted as the vanguard and covered the flanks. Behind them marched the forces of Galicia, followed by the men of Chernigov. But unity among the princes was fragile at best. Further back, Prince Romanovich of Kiev hesitated, holding his men on the western side of the river. His instincts warned him that the pursuit was reckless, but he was ignored. At the front, the Cumans clashed with scattered Mongol detachments. These small groups quickly melted away in different directions, feigning panic. The eager Cumans charged after them, followed closely by the Galician forces, but their advance was uncoordinated. The army became stretched across the plain. Only half had crossed the river, with others still making their way through the marshy banks. The divisions were isolated, unable to support one another. Subutai had seen this unfold countless times before, and now it was time to strike. The Mongol cavalry, half of them clad in heavy armor, thundered into action. This was no skirmish with arrows from a distance. It was a full-scale, direct assault designed to overwhelm and crush. The Cumans, lightly armored and unprepared for such a sudden attack, were caught in a vice. With the river behind them and friendly forces too far to intervene, they had no room to retreat, no space to regroup. In moments, the front collapsed. The Cuman riders turned to flee, but found only chaos as they crashed into the oncoming ranks of Chernigov's soldiers. The fleeing vanguard smashed into their own allies, disordering the entire formation. Seizing the opportunity, Jebe led a fierce assault from the north, cutting deep into the disorganized Rus's ranks. On the southern flank, Mongol cavalry swept in to complete the encirclement. The battlefield dissolved into a nightmare. The Rus's soldiers, gripped by fear, trampled one another in a desperate bid to escape. Mongol horsemen cut down any who faltered. The once proud army collapsed into a panicked mob, scattering in every direction. Thousands fell beneath Mongol arrows and swords. There was no time to regroup, no space for leaders to rally their men. Within hours, the coalition army had been utterly broken. Further west, Prince Romanovich of Kiev watched the disaster unfold. With his forces still intact, he acted quickly, ordering his men to build a defensive perimeter using their supply wagons. It was a desperate attempt to survive in the face of an unstoppable enemy. Meanwhile, stragglers from the routed divisions tried to flee toward the Kievan camp. But Mongol cavalry, swift and merciless, cut them down before they could reach safety. Having destroyed the vanguard and main divisions, Subutai and Jebe now turned their attention to the final Rus's stronghold. The Mongol army surrounded Romanovich's camp, encircling the wagons on all sides. The sky darkened with arrows as Mongol archers unleashed volley after volley upon the trapped soldiers within. For 3 unbearable days, the men inside endured constant bombardment, surrounded by the bodies of their fallen comrades. Supplies ran low, water even scarcer. The cries of the wounded and dying filled the air. With no hope of escape, Prince Romanovich faced an impossible choice. The Mongol commanders offered terms: surrender, and no harm would come to his men. Desperate to save what remained of his army, Romanovich agreed, but the promise was a lie. The moment the defenders laid down their arms and stepped beyond the barricades, the Mongols turned on them. Many were cut down immediately. The rest were taken as prisoners. Among the captives were the Rus nobles, including Prince Romanovich himself. Their fate would become a brutal warning to all who defied the Mongol Empire. The captured nobles were bound and thrown to the ground. The Mongols constructed a wooden platform over their bodies. Upon this grim stage, they celebrated their victory, feasting atop the crushed nobility, slowly squeezing the life from their captives beneath the weight. It was a calculated display, a reminder that resistance meant humiliation and death. The Battle of the Kalka River had ended in catastrophe for the Rus. Of the estimated 80,000 coalition soldiers, only a fraction survived. Tens of thousands perished, their bodies left to rot across the steppe. The Cumans, once a dominant force among the steppe tribes, never recovered. Their political influence shattered entirely. For the Mongols, losses were minimal. Their discipline, deception, and superior tactics had turned the coalition's overwhelming numbers into a liability. But the Mongols had not come to conquer Rus, not yet. Their mission, a massive reconnaissance raid, was now complete. Jebe and Subutai led their army back across the steppe, circling north of the Caspian Sea, completing what would later be remembered as one of the most daring cavalry raids in history. But their return to the east was not the end of the Mongol threat. It was only the beginning. A decade later, the Mongols would return, not as scouts, but as conquerors. And this time, they would not stop at the borders.